Now, at 20 years old, you've just taken your human sexuality class, and some guy starts to stalk you.
Yeah.
Who is this guy?
I don't know where he saw me. He was from Birmingham. I was modeling with an agency.
How old was he?
I think he was 35.
He was 35.
Recently
Married?
divorced. He, from what I understand, was let go of his job for mental issues and was given a disability check. So he had all the time in the world to stalk me. The first phone call came in.
And how do you start to first realize you're being stalked?
It took a couple of times. The first phone call that came in, he said he was with a college magazine and wanted to do a survey, and it was supposed to be anonymous, and took my number out of a directory. He made it sound like he didn't know what my name was. Asked me all these questions. What kind of movies do I like? What kind of music do I listen to?
And of course, this is prior to Facebook, so he's getting a lot of information about you.
And it was like a checklist, you know, like we're just doing a survey,
do you like
college
horror
kids
movies?
survey. Right. I answer everything, and before he hung up the phone, he said my name, thank you, and said my real name, and I was like, oh, I didn't realize he knew my name, but it didn't make a difference. I just remember kind of being like, oh. So I got off the phone. A couple of days later, he called again and said, do you remember me? I called about the survey. I did this. I was like, yeah, I remember you. He goes, well, I really liked your answers, and I was just wondering if you'd ever want to meet. And I said, no, thank you. And he said, okay, and he got off the phone. And then like a week later, he called again and told me what I did that day. I worked at a restaurant, and it was an outdoor patio restaurant. And I was a server, and he told me the people that I served and what happened, and just little details about what my morning was like. And at that point I was like, why? You know, why are you watching me? Yeah. And he was angry at me because I was the girl that would never date a guy like him.
You think you're better than I am?
Yeah.
That type of...
Yeah.
And he sounded angry?
It's girls like you.
It's girls like you.
And it lasted.
Did you call the police?
I didn't the first couple of times.
You did not?
No.
Then what happened?
But then I started. He kept calling and telling me about things.
Now, there was some anger, but was there any threats? Or?
There was. As soon as I started hanging up the phone on him, then he would call back and be mad. You can't hang up the phone on me. And then he would start saying things that he was going to do to me, which is how the human sexuality kind of came into play, because my grades started slipping in this class. And it was a female teacher, and she pulled me aside and asked me what was happening, because I was a good student.
Yeah.
And I confided in her that this was just starting, and I didn't really know what to do about it, and I didn't know how to stop it.
And how were the police reacting?
I don't think I had done a police report at this time. I think she encouraged me to, because she said, he sounds like a sexual sadist, and it's dangerous. And she started giving me any literature on what a sexual sadist was. Richard Ramirez, you know, all these different serial killers who targeted women out of anger. And I started studying. She's like, you need to know what you're up against. So I started reading these things. It was horrifying. But I still had a life to live, and I still was playing in a band, and I was still doing everything.
You had a life to live, you had money to earn, you had a band.
Yeah. I still had to do things. So I kept going on with my life, but it became a point where I would have to, it was before cell phones. So if I was going to go to the grocery store, I would call a girlfriend, hey, I'm going to go to the grocery store. I'll call you when I get back in 30 minutes. If I didn't call her when I got back, she would call the police. So at this point, I had started her police report.
How were the police?
They were very good.
Very helpful.
Yeah. And I only lived
They took it seriously?
Yeah. I only lived about 2 minutes from the police station. And just before my 21st birthday, things kind of got a little more aggressive. He tried to break into my apartment. And
how often is he calling you at this point?
Once every couple of weeks.
Every couple of weeks.
And he would tell me things that I've been doing and people I've hung out with. So I became very aware of my surroundings. I would walk to my car, and I would look for shadows under everything, you know, very hyper aware.
Did you have a boyfriend, or were you dating at this time?
I had a boyfriend that was also in a band. He traveled a lot, so it was,
It was an
very
immature relationship.
yeah, very immature relationship. Nothing too terribly serious. He knew what was going on. My best friends knew what was going on. My band knew what was going on. He had shown up to a few of my concerts. I didn't know what he looked like at this point. And when I found out what he looked like, he had come to my job. I was working for an opera company, and I was the only one in the office that day, and this guy came in with a clipboard saying that he was with the telephone directory and he was doing
a survey.
No, it wasn't a survey this time. He was doing making sure that the information was correct, and he had like everything it looked like.
You can get in anywhere with a clipboard.
Exactly.
Honest to God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So after, and I didn't recognize his voice, but after he left, I was like, that didn't settle very well.
No.
So I went out. It was a ground floor office. I went out to the security guard. He was white. He was a little bit taller than me, but not much. He had kind of wavy hair, bluish eyes, not attractive, very dumpy looking. So I went out to the security guard and I said, did that man that came into my office go anywhere else in the building? He's like, no, but I recognize him. I was like, oh, okay. So it kind of diffused me, like maybe he had been around in the building that day. And a couple of days later, so I just brushed it off. It's probably my paranoia. A couple of days later, the security guard comes into my office. He's like, come here, I need you to see something. And he brings me out, and across the street in front of a USA Today mail, where you get the USA Today, the man was standing there leaned up against it looking like he was reading a paper. And he goes, is that the guy that came into your office? And I said, yeah, that's him. He's like, that's where I've seen him from. I see him there a lot. So he said, are you going to lunch today? And I said, I wasn't planning on it. He's like, you need to go to lunch. You need to go straight to the police station and tell them what he looks like. And he said he would follow me out. So I left, and as I'm starting to leave to go to my car, the guy starts crossing the street. Toward me. And the security guard was behind me. Watching.
But he doesn't know.
No. So I just hear, his name was Bill, greatest guy ever. He was like, just go to your car, go to your car. And I walked to my car, and then I went to the police station and gave a physical description. That was the first time, probably after 8 months, that I actually knew what he looked like.
Wow.
And he had been in my environment dozens of times.
Yes.
He broke into my house for a second time. The first time, my neighbor stopped him. I wasn't there. I came home. The police are there. He had tried to pry my door open. And I came in and was like, what's going on? And this was after this is when I had already gotten a pistol permit. After one of the times before my 21st birthday, there was a situation where I felt like I need to protect myself. Yeah. My dad got me a gun. He said,
common in the South.
You're not old enough to carry it. I didn't want to carry it illegally, so I went to the police station and I just asked them, can I do this? And the sheriff issued me a gun permit. So I had a carry and conceal permit. I knew how to use it. It was, something when you grow up with guns, you know how to use them. So when he had broken into my house the first time, the neighbor across the way from me, all of our doors were wooden doors. And I remember that one of the cops who knew, when they pulled up my information that I had a gun permit, he's like, you can't shoot through this door. Because if you shoot through this door and she's on the other side of her door, you're going to hit her.
But they catch him the second time?
Yeah, I held him at gunpoint until they got there. He pried open my door with a crowbar.
And you held him at gunpoint?
It was very fast. I had already called 911.
Did you tell him when you held him at gunpoint that if he moved, he might be making
I just told him that the police were on the way. When I heard my door rattling, I dialed 911.
How did he...
He didn't move. There was no conversation between us.
Did he apologize?
Nope. There was no conversation. He didn't say a word, which was probably in his best interest because when he got arrested, there was no stalking law in Alabama, so he got arrested for breaking and entering, which doesn't really carry a very high sentence. So...
and did he stop after that?
Well, I moved. He went to jail, and I got the opportunity to go to New York, and I took it within like a 2 weeks notice.
And do you feel that you took that opportunity to go to New York because of the trauma?
I just felt like I was a target there and it wouldn't stop. I'd never been north of Tennessee, and I got in my car with like $400. I sold everything that I had.
You're 21 years old.
I had just turned 22.
22 years old, you have $400 cash in a car. You go from Alabama.
One of the women that I hired for an opera, because I was working for an opera company, she lived in New York, and she just randomly called me and said, I know you're having trouble in the South. I want to take this job in Florida, and I need someone to work in my job and live in my apartment for 4 months. And it was right around the same time that I knew he was getting out of jail. So I was like, yes.
Right. What was the job?
I was working for a chiropractor.
Okay.
On the Upper West Side.
Okay. Now you go to New York City, where I'm from.
Yeah, and I got a modeling contract. My modeling agency in Birmingham was able to find me a contract in New York. So I had high hopes of becoming a famous model.
Of course you did. How do you react to New York?
Oh, I loved it. I was anonymous. When you go from feeling like someone is constantly watching you to being in a place where it's impossible to stalk anyone.
And no one
cares.
knows. No one cares.
Yeah.
There's too many people.
I felt amazing because I was anonymous.
Yes.
I blended in. How I segued into this industry is completely by a snowball effect. I went to a nightclub.
Yes.
On the Lower West Side.
Lower West Side, okay. Village?
Yep. Actually, south of the Village. So it was like where it was very industrial still.
Now, that is a very hot area today, but that was some dangerous stuff.
And there was a nightclub called Jackie 60, but there was in the Village Voice, there was a club.
It's a very popular weekly newspaper in New York City.
Yeah. And this club was called Jackie 60, and it was hosted by a drag queen named Mistress Formica.
Of course it was.
And being from the South, I was like, I've got to go.
Of course you do.
I have to see what this is about. And she had a cat suit on, and the only time I'd ever seen a cat suit was in
on Halloween.
Superhero movies, Catwoman. So I went, and it was everybody, not everybody, but the majority of people were dressed in fetish clothes.
Fetish clothes. What are fetish clothes?
I didn't know at the time. I was
And what were you dressed in?
Probably black.
Blue jeans.
Yeah. Normal clothes.
Yeah. You were in normal clothes. Were you alone?
I was.
You went alone?
Yeah. I didn't have any. It was probably only a couple of weeks after being there.
Okay.
So
you're in, and you're dressed in normal clothes. They're dressed in shiny clothes.
And this
then what
girl
happened?
came up to me, and she had on this cute little, very shiny outfit, and I asked her if I could touch it, which is funny because now when I wear my things out in public, people are like, can I touch you? Yeah. I was the same way. It was so pretty and shiny, I just have to touch it.
So you said, excuse me, ma'am, may I touch your...
I did.
Yeah, and she said, sure.
Yeah. And then she asked me, I had a very southern accent, a very deep southern accent, so she asked me where I was from, and I told her. And how long have you been here? So we struck up a conversation. And
how old was she?
A couple of years older than me, maybe mid to late 20s. So I asked her where she got her clothes, and it was in the same neighborhood that I lived in on the east side. And we exchanged numbers, and then I went home. And then
that was that.
We started, I called her, I said, do you want to grab coffee one day? So my off days were Wednesdays and Sundays. So we met for coffee, and one thing led to another, and I finally was like, so what do you do? And she's like,
is this at the first coffee or
the first one, first time we met?
First coffee, you say, and so by the way, what do you do?
Yeah, because she'd ask me, what are you here for?
Well, I work at a chiropractor's office. And
of course I didn't say that. I said I was a model.
Of course you did. And she said, and you said, well, what do you do?
Yeah.
And then she said.
And she didn't want to say, and I was like, what's wrong?
Yeah.
And she's like, well, I work as a submissive in a club.
And you don't know what that is.
I had no clue.
You said, madam, what is a submissive?
I'm thinking nightclub.
Qu'est-ce que c'est submissive?
I knew what a submissive was because I had studied it. Dominant and submissive.
Okay.
But how do you be a submissive in a club?